Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL, and in this episode, I welcome Jesper Wallgren. Jesper is a trained architect turned software founder and the co-founder of Finch, an early-stage design tool that focuses on generative space planning and seamless integration with the AEC industry's existing workflows. Based in Sweden, Jesper brings a clear-eyed perspective to the growing landscape of AI-driven design tools, and his journey from running a small architecture studio to leading a focused, globally distributed software company is both relatable and inspiring. In this episode, we cover the transition from architectural practice to software development and what Jesper learned by stepping away from billable hours to building a product that aims to serve the profession more broadly. We discuss the importance of maintaining creative control in a digital design tool, how Finch integrates with Rhino, Revit, and Forma, and why the visual fidelity and customization of drawings still matter to architects. Jesper also explains their unique approach to training AI on built project data and the challenges of accommodating regional code and design preferences around the world. A key theme from this conversation that stood out as a valuable takeaway is the power of focusing on one problem and knowing what not to build. Jesper and the Finch team started out wanting to do it all, from hydrology to terrain modeling to unit layouts, but through user feedback, internal debate, and even the painful decision to delete entire swaths of code, they found clarity in serving a specific audience, architects designing multifamily residential buildings, and solving a specific problem, early-stage space planning. Their decision to go deep rather than wide is not just a business strategy, it's a sign of respect for the people using the tools. Stay tuned to hear how that focus unlocked real traction for Finch and how this lesson might apply to your own innovation strategy. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You can find that directly in your podcast app if you're a paid member. Thank you, paid members. And if you're a free member, you can find them at the website, which is again, trxl.co. Lastly, you can really help the podcast by sharing these episodes with your colleagues and by commenting and sharing my LinkedIn posts. You can also leave a comment over on YouTube and engage with me and other listeners there. So, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Jesper Wallgren. All right, Jesper, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. I finally get to meet you face to face.
Thank you. Nice to be here. And nice to finally meet you as well.
Maybe you can just kick us off and give us kind of your story. Architect turned software developer. I've been watching this kind of unfold for quite a few years now. And so kind of take us back to where all of this began with your story and ultimately what is now Finch.
Yeah, so me and one of the other founders of Finch, Pamela, who's actually my wife as well, we used to run an architecture studio here in Sweden. A small practice. I think we were 6 architects the most. And we started to build in-house tool to become more efficient. Probably heard similar stories before, using Grasshopper and so on to compete with the bigger firms and so on. And I, one of these tools, the adaptive plan that I had developed in Grasshopper, I posted that one online. I didn't know if anyone would care at all, actually, because I mean it was quite a while ago, and the Grasshopper community was maybe not that big, and computational design was not as big as it is today. But I posted that on Instagram, I believe it was, and it just blew up. I mean, people started to like it. Thousands of people started to like it. Big companies were starting to call us, can we buy this solution and so on. And I was just like, well, not yet at least. But then we realized that he was really something. And then we said, let's fold the architecture company and start a proper software company. And that took a year because we had ongoing projects and clients and so on, and we didn't want to just leave them, so that was really exciting. And I think that what really pushed us into starting this software company was when we realized if we can build these great tools, we can actually, share it with all of our colleagues out there and create a much bigger impact than just keeping it to ourselves and trying to find more clients to use these tools with. So yeah, that was start of it.
Wow. I am curious to hear. Okay, so you said it was exciting transitioning from the architecture studio to software development. Tell me more about that because I would imagine at some level, like you've been trained as an architect, right? And
Yeah.
so you've basically said no to that and you've said yes to this. What was that like for you? Because I'm sure exciting is not the only word in that transition.
No, uh, I mean, I think in general, change and new things can be really exciting,
Mm-hmm.
and because in the beginning it just, or at least the way I am and my co-founders, I mean, in the beginning you only see the potential.
Yeah.
You don't see the problems yet that you, and leaving, architecture studio, of course, that was, um, I mean, we had been running that for a couple of years, or 4 years maybe. So that was, maybe not that exciting anymore
Right.
compared, or no, to be honest, I really liked running an architecture studio.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I miss, just designing buildings, but I think we had this new thing that was maybe even more exciting. But the transition was for sure challenging in many ways. There was a lot of things that we did not know, venture capital. How does that work?
Mm-hmm.
How do you start a software company? How do we pay the developers that's going to build this product and so on? I mean, running an architecture studio, you sell your hours to help your client design. Building a software company is just a completely different
Yeah.
thing. So that was. I don't know if I would say it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that we've been really good at is, asking for help and advice from other people that has done this journey before. And I think if you just ask, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are willing to share their experience and are willing to help you and so on. So, but of course, that it's been a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like two things, right? It's new. It's a completely new thing, and so there's an excitement kind of built into that
Yeah,
because, like you said, you see all the potential in it, but you don't know what you don't know, and you don't see the pitfalls and the challenges that are going to inevitably show up during doing something completely new, starting as a beginner, basically. And luckily, like you said, there are so many people that you can talk to and get advice and how to navigate this and what to look out for and all of those things. But there's also like everybody's got an opinion and doesn't mean that it's going to apply to what you're doing. And so you have to navigate that part of it too, right? It's like
yeah.
figuring out which advice you're going to follow when you do this. And I'm very curious about your training as an architect. And did that help, hinder, a little bit of both as you made this transition into software development?
Uh, a little bit of both, I would say. Um, I think, yeah, I mean, when starting a software company, I think one thing is really good, and that is to be really, good at one thing, going deep that, and know your
Mm-hmm.
customer, know your client, and I think to be able to design a design software for architects, one has to be an architect, and I think one has to be an architect just to understand what architects actually are saying when you talk to them. So I think not this journey would have been possible with without my years of practice
Mm-hmm.
thing as an architect, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, has it hindered it in any way? I don't know. I don't think so. Not for me at least. I would say I've mostly have a positive things that have helped me in this journey, I would say.
Yeah, it's like obviously I'm sure not everything has gone right, right?
No.
Right. But at the same time, you recognize the value in the learning through that process, right? And as an
Yeah.
architect, being almost, I mean, I think something that's in the DNA of architects is like you're up for the challenge of whatever it
Mm.
is. Like that's what new projects are, is new challenges, and no, we don't shy away from those challenges, and so you do see the value in going through that process. And
Yeah.
it's like many times there's these success stories, and it's like, well, oh my gosh, it was hell to get here, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade it for anything. Like you hear that over. It's
Yeah.
just like architecture school. Like, oh, it was
Yeah.
really hard, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade it for anything, right?
No. But I think one thing that I learned from architecture school, and I can see compared to my fellow co-founders or employees and so on, is that I spent 5 years at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts learning architecture, and during that time, you get criticized a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and you become kind of humble. You have an idea, you do your best, you get criticized or you get feedback, as they call it. You thought it was great. It was not great, turned out. Then I go home, iterate,
I
and
love
so
that.
on.
I love that. You thought it was great. It was not great. It turns out like that is exactly your design jury critique scenario, like in a
Yeah.
nutshell, right there.
Yeah, and that helped a lot when building software and presenting it for potential clients and so on. Because, I mean, speed of iteration is key, and you cannot be beaten down with the fact that people do not like your product. Because in the beginning, most startups and most products are really bad. I mean, and because you need to try to sell it to customers as fast as possible to get feedback. Does this make sense at all, and so on. And that you cannot take that as a critique on you or your product and so on. That is just like a way to learn really, really fast. And I think I learned that in architecture school. I would not be prepared for that kind of feedback without architecture school, to be honest.
Yeah, so it would have been crushing otherwise.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
and there's no shortage of people out there who are totally willing to kill other people's ideas, right? Like that.
No.
Absolutely. It's like the idea is like a small child, and people are so willing to crush that small child, right? They're fragile, is what I mean. They're very fragile, these ideas. And it's the same in architectural design, and the designers pinning up their fragile ideas on the wall and being extremely vulnerable by putting their creation up on the wall for other people who literally want to tear it down. And so like early product, you're saying, even with software development is a lot like that.
Yeah, and in our case, especially in the beginning, I would say there was, I mean, I wouldn't say a lot, but some people, I would say there's always been more people positive than criticizing that is. But, it was a lot about AI will never be able to, replace the architect. What you generate is not real architecture and has no soul and this kind of things and so on. And we've never, claimed that we want to replace the architect or anything else. We're just building a tool for architects. So this kind of critique you just have to, ignore. There's always people that misinterpret what you're doing and just want to say bad things about it.
Yeah. Well, take us back to where Finch started. And I mean, when I remember like the animations that you were posting early on of the adaptive plan and kind of these algorithmically adapted plans that just kind of flex, you're flexing an outer boundary and the walls are updating on the inside and the furniture layout and all those things. Like, I'm sure it started even earlier than that, and you were kind of solving a problem that you had running an architecture studio. And then it's like, oh, well, how does this apply to all these different projects? And where did you start with this idea?
Yeah, so, I mean, just like you said, it started tools for us. The adaptive plan, the first version that I made in Grasshopper, I mean, it was just as you say, a bound at flex, and then it puts algorithmically another plan in there and flex it and so on. Uh, and when turning this into a proper software that other architects could use, it started out very similar, that they had this kind of chain of events that you put something in this end, and then it goes through this geometry engine and something else comes out. And that is a great workflow for some challenges, I would say. That is very kind of grasshopper thinking, parametric thinking, and that can be great if you're doing very highly repetitive things, or like a complex facade system and so on. But when it comes to the designing, we learned that you need to be able to go in and, this chain, and just say, I would like to move that wall.
Mm-hmm.
It might not follow the overall logic, but I would like to move that wall because it feels better.
Let's take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about AVAIL. Is your team struggling to find the BIM assets they need? AVAIL's content management system simplifies access to all of your firm's content in one easy-to-use platform. No matter where your files live or what type of files they are, you can easily search and access them from AVAIL. Now, designers can consistently find and reuse all types of content. So what does that mean? Well, standards-compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic. New hires are easier to onboard. Projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. You get the idea. Visit getavail.com to try AVAIL for free and request a free demo. That's getavail.com, GETAVAIL.com. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now let's get back to the conversation. Can I just pause for a second? Like that's architecture, right? It's like you design these rules, and then you decide when you're going to break those rules because they're worth breaking and for reasons, right? And so software doesn't understand that necessarily, right? It's when it's very much like, here are the inputs, here are the outputs. At some point in the middle, you're saying, I want to interject, I want to make a change, and the software's like, okay, now it's broken. It's just broken from here on down, right? Because it no longer works. But I think we're seeing this in quite a few tools, right? Where it's like, well, you can intervene, you can make changes, and things are still working. And that's been kind of, I don't know, I don't want to call it a recent update, but let's just say in the last 5 years, we're seeing that more and more, where it's like, okay, I get to, quote unquote, break this thing. And by, I don't mean that in any kind of negative sense at all, right? Like, that's what we do. And I want everything to still work.
Yeah, and I think that key to make when you're making a tool for architects or any creative people, you need to provide them with the freedom to break these rules, or else it won't make sense. And I think that the same goes, they have a client, a developer, they want these key figures, here you have the site, and somewhere, when they're figuring out the design, you will probably need to break, because these initial key figures maybe not make sense when you get to know the design and the plot and so on, and then you need to break some rules. And if you're good at communicating, explain why is this a better solution, then you will probably come up with a better project in general. And I think that's key, that you're allowed to do that. And we see, just as you said, I think we're seeing it more and more, also with, for example, Cursor and the large language models, vibe coding and this kind of things, where you don't have AI generating necessarily the whole thing, but you are coding, and then AI, you might like this part here, and then adds that and so on. So it becomes more kind of a shared design experience between AI and architect, and that is where we're trying to go or position ourselves.
Yeah, architects by nature they like to control things. Right? I like to say they're control enthusiasts, not necessarily control freaks, right? That just sounds bad, but control enthusiast has a nice ring to it. And
yeah.
do you think that that's why a lot of architects have shied away from modern tools, is because it's taking more and more away from the designer and I don't mean like young, like the younger generation. I'm actually talking about the older generations, right? It's like when you draw by
Yeah.
hand, you literally control every single thing that goes on the sheet, literally
Yeah.
controlled with your hand.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, especially when you have that mentality and when that's how you've always done things, right? This is the old, well, this is the way we've always done things kind of an argument, right? But it's like, well, for reasons, right? Because
Yeah.
I want to control and I know what each one of these lines means, and I don't want that taken away from me. And then we kind of swung the other direction with generative design and spitting out thousands and thousands of iterations really quickly. And okay, well, it thought of some things that I wouldn't have thought of, because in the amount of time that I would have taken, I could generate, 3 or 5 options,
Yeah.
and it generated thousands, and I can then just pick from the thousands as a good starting point. But again, it's like taking away the control of
Mm.
of that. And so I'm curious from your standpoint, when you're developing software, I'm sure that's a different problem, right? It's like, oh, as soon as I want to control something, that's a different piece of software. And Grasshopper, like you said, it's like algorithmic, parametric. Yeah, of course you can control some sliders and things, but you can't necessarily, like if you wanted to tweak one wall's angle,
Yeah.
the algorithm breaks at that point, and
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
to outgrow maybe Grasshopper at some point. And I'm just curious, like, what that brings up, this whole idea of control.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about the older architect, I'm soon one of them, but I think a lot of the generative, speaking of control and so on, I think a lot of the generative tools and AI for architects and so on we've seen so far has not been good enough and has not have maybe high precision enough. That is starting to change now, I would say, quite rapidly. So maybe they have not taken the time to learn there. And then I think there's an other part of it as well. When generating vast amount of data, as you say, thousands of design options, it also becomes very important how do we navigate through all of these and evaluate all of these options and what makes sense to us. And that has also been very hard. I think most software we see now, the solution to this is like a parallel axis diagram, and you see, a lot of numbers and so on. But still, we get the numbers. That's great if you're a developer or like math or whatever. But it can also be very tricky to, evaluate the architectural quality based on these numbers. So I think we're still, finding our way as an industry. How do we navigate a lot of data? Do we need a lot of data? Do we need thousands of options, or do we need 4 great options? I think that is something that we're all, both software developers and architects, are looking into and very interested in right now.
Sure.
And we've also had clients that presented a lot of options to their clients, the real estate developer, and said, and I mean, this is of course one user story out of many, but that said, yeah, it just made the dialogue much harder, because now the real estate developer could not make a decision because they wanted a piece of this suggestion combined with a piece of this suggestion.
Of course they did. Yeah.
And somehow that is the architect's job to just say, this is the good suggestion for you.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely. I can't tell you how many times I sat at a table with a client with 9 options, because the principal on the project pushed for 9 different options, and so it's like, okay, now I get to try to help them navigate through this. And how many times we tore this piece of paper off of that plan and pasted it onto taped it onto this one and said like this, and then as an architect you're like, how the hell am I going to make this work? Right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we just cobbled together a mess, and now I have to, and now you have a new design problem, a different kind of design problem, which is
Yeah.
like making order out of chaos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, when it comes to intervening with the software, with the algorithmic output, though, I mean, early on with what you were providing, it was algorithmic output, and so maybe
Mm.
just talk about how you started to address the issue of being an architect and dealing with algorithmic output, and how you started to deal with that as far as the tooling went.
You mean in Finch or
Yeah, in
before that?
Finch.
Yeah. 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 So very early on, we realized that we need to build an editor.
Mm.
We need to build a great editor uh, that that architects loves to work with. I mean, we generated things, but and I don't think that has changed at all in the product now or in the user. I would say whatever you generate in Finch as an architect, myself as well, I always want to go in, and make it my own. Not necessarily better always, to be honest, but making it my own,
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we see Finch now as providing you with a great starting point, helping you understand what has been generated by providing you with all of the key figures and so on, but also giving you the possibility to make it your own and move a wall a little bit, adding a nice piece of furniture. I've started to add guitars in all of my plans
Nice.
now. I have a flying V lying at the bed.
Speaking
Exactly.
of guitars, yeah, I'm a huge fan. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that I mean, and that is
Personalizing.
the kind. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all to the project, or it doesn't improve the key figures or the profit of the whole thing, but it brings something to it that makes me as an architect proud of the project, and I think that's I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's important to provide a tool where you as a creative person can create nice thing that you are proud of.
I think so many times software has taken that away from us. I'm kind of going back to
Yeah.
that little earlier bit of conversation about the older generations. It's like I remember when people were drawing by hand, like there would be little flourishes. It's kind of a weird word to use, right? But it was like there was these little things where it's like magic, little bit of
Yeah.
magic right there, a little
Yeah.
bit right here. If I didn't like something, I could cover it up with a tree or whatever,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we just had like that level of control and that level of personalization, right? I mean, you see it in old projects that you go visit, real world
Yeah.
physical places like a Frank Lloyd Wright building
Yeah.
or a Billy Chen Todd Williams building where there's a bas relief cast in the concrete of the
Yeah.
partie of the plan. Like these are really cool little flourishes and buildings. And obviously, economy kind
Yeah.
of crushes a lot of that, right? Because it's like, well, that's not efficient. That takes extra time. It takes extra resources to do those kinds of things. But I would also like put those in the category of craft in
Mm.
architecture and
Mm.
software. It's harder to get craft out of software. And so like I'm curious, like you're an architect, you're talking about kind of adding personalization in your plans and tweaking things to make it more to your liking as a
Yeah.
tastemaker, like something you're going to be presenting to a developer and saying this is the option that we should go with based on,
Yeah.
obviously your experience as an architect, but also all these other like constraints and things that you're dealing with. Like, how do you build that into software, I guess is my question, because I think a lot of software developers out there don't do that at all.
No. I mean, if you look at Finch, we generate floor plans and circulation, unit layouts, and so on, and it's a lot about this puzzle of different space planning within a building. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very, I mean, very dry in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is the numbers. You need to make the numbers work. It needs to be accessible. You need to be efficient enough. You need to all of these kind of things. And our take on it was, especially when we started with adding furniture in there, that the first furniture we added to Finch was we provided a chair and like an accessibility band around it, or I think it's called ADA bound in the US.
Yep.
And that helped us to evaluate whether a space was accessible or not, or does the door,
does it meet the requirements? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Does it meet the requirements? But the very day we added this furniture, there was an urge to make this look nice.
Mm-hmm.
We started to replace the chairs with more nice-looking chairs, and then we said that probably all users would like to do that. And you have different furniture in Scandinavia, in US, in Asia, and so on. And we figured that is probably an important part of it. So that is the something that we then opened up for anyone to and then other things, like small things that, for example, what in Finch, all of the different diagrams that being produced, for example, you can see residential, office, retail, and so on. And then you have at space level, you have your bathrooms, living room, so on. All of these kind of things also, the colors are customizables and so on. And it has nothing to do whether it's a great floor plan or not. But we can also see that all of our users and customers want their own color scheme.
Sure.
I mean,
branding. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that these small things are just important. So we're trying to make it as open as possible for the designer, the software.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company AVAIL, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. You're basically speaking of more things that software has taken away from from control enthusiasts over the years, right? And so from your perspective, you just kind of talked about like the level of importance that you see that brings, but I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about that, because like how important is it that the graphical output looks great to you? Because the tool, like we all have tools where it's like, well, yeah, it allows people to draw like the most, I'll just call it the utilitarian version of the thing, because that's what really matters, right? Then there's like this graphic quality layer that architecture has always kind of had a thing for, right? Yeah. It's like, well, that matters. That's been passed down to me for sure from the older generations. It's like, it's not just that it solves the function and the utility that a drawing is, the communication that it's conveying, but it also has to look good. And it has to look good because that graphical quality communicates something to whoever you're communicating with. And so I'm curious, from your point of view, like, is that something that you're trying to do in Finch, and why does that matter?
Yeah, I would say for two main reasons. I think one is that if your product or your project looks good within the product within Finch, when you as an architect present it to your fellow architects, to clients, and so on, it makes your project better. And we have clients that actually present in Finch, opening the browser, and then because the visuals are great. And then I would also say, I mean, if you spend 8 hours a day, designing floor plans or creating architecture, I mean, it's nice if your workspace looks nice. It's nice to look at. So that is something we really trying to. For example, one battle I'm always having at the office is in Finch. You have a big canvas, and they have a little header and some tools at the side. And I think it's easy if you're not an architect trying to invade on my canvas, adding a little panel, adding a button, and all of a sudden my canvas is just 1/9 of the screen in the middle here, and I cannot have that. I think that is probably also the architect within that. I mean, I want a great big canvas. Finch is not the hero here. My project within Finch is the hero. That's what I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Finch is just an enabler to make my project happen. And I think the UI and the experience need to reflect that.
It also makes it a tool that you can then use for a presentation, right? Because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
UI kind of gets out of the way, and it is about the project, which is what the person you're presenting to actually cares about, not all of the UI that's floating around.
Yeah.
So
We actually had speaking of that, in the beginning of Finch, we had what we call a presentation studio. So you had the things there, the studio where you're designing, then you had the presentation studio. But we actually removed that of a number of reasons. But I think that the main one, or if we can make the actual creative space look good enough, it can be a presentation studio. So you cannot hide behind the presentation. So here it looks good. When I'm designing, it does not look good. So now everything needs to look good.
well, and how many times are people, architects, in a meeting presenting, and it's like, well, what happens if we change this? And then you have to completely switch the workspace UI to go to like the the 747 cockpit version with all this, and the client's like, what just happened, right? It's super because switching modes is, I mean, that is a cognitive load, not just for the designer, but for the person watching as well. I mean, and you don't always have the luxury of two monitors and throwing all your palettes over on a different monitor. And so you just have the canvas on the one presentation monitor. You don't always, I mean, modern computing is a 15-inch laptop, right? So, or an iPad or something. And it's like, you don't want to take a huge setup to it, and they can't always come to you. And so you kind of think about all these constraints and kind of what the lowest common denominator is of all that. And it's like, well, I have this screen, this 15-inch screen, and how can I make it look good and work in it at the same time? I mean, I think these are all really important considerations that you're making as a developer on behalf of the architect, that maybe these don't even come up in the features and benefits of the website, but it's like something that you see and you feel when you use it. And because there's plenty of examples of software out there that invade in your screen space down to that really small canvas that you're talking about. And it's like, I mean, that all plays into what it's like to use the software, but also the benefits that your client's going to get out of it when you're communicating your ideas to them.
Yeah, for sure. I agree, and it's great to see, especially we have a couple of younger architects here at the firm that always just use their laptop, and one of them has a really small laptop as well. And I think I ask him once a week, don't you want a bigger screen? But he likes the freedom of that, I guess. So it's nice to see it works well there.
You can literally work anywhere with his setup, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you start adding more pieces to it, you start limiting where you can go with it, and I can see.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and but that is important for us too. I mean, I'm of one of the old Grasshopper users. I need my 2 monitors with Grasshopper 1, Rhino 1, and so on. But it's nice to see that it works really well, and we've been inspired a lot by Figma. Software for UX and UI designers. I think they've managed to do this really well, package something very technical, very complex into a neat little,
Yeah.
product.
Yeah, the UI kind of gets out of the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
And yeah.
exactly.
So you mentioned a key word earlier, which was better, and what the
Mhm.
context was is when you can see the graphical fidelity, because it matters. That was quote
Mm.
unquote better, and I think there would be a lot of people who would maybe argue that it's okay, it's nice to have, it's not a need to have, but I'm just like, what kind of quantitative description can you give to that qualitative aspect of graphic quality, graphic fidelity, and better as an architect? And I mean,
Mm.
your clients are architects, right? And so,
Mm.
do do architects who care about that more naturally gravitate towards Finch in what you're doing, or do you feel like they're sold on other things and that's just an extra, a bonus that they get out of it?
Yeah, I would say it's an extra. It's a bonus for sure. I The offices that purchase Finch, they do it for the generative features, the efficiency gains, the ability to challenge, come up with new ideas, and so on. And then the nice packaging is a an extra thing. And I of course you never know what makes a person deciding why they want to buy the software. But I think if if you don't have the need to have down, I mean, if you don't, for example, in the beginning you could not rotate walls because we hadn't built a rotate tool. That was a problem. I
Mm.
mean, that was a thing that people said, no, I'm not going to purchase because the editor is not good enough. So then we built that. But there's of course not never that hard kind of thing when it comes to the visual qualities. But I think I experienced that architects out there are rooting for us. I mean, they're at our side. I think it's when you see a product, when you talk to us, it's obvious that we are architects. The decisions we are making for the products is by architects for architects. We early on said we're not selling to developers, we're selling to architects. Everyone said that's a really bad idea. All of the monies are at the developer side. All of the investors said it was a bad idea. Even architects said it was a bad idea. Uh, but somewhere along the line, I'm very happy that we took that decision because in where we're at right now, at least, at the end of the day, the designing of the building ends up at the architects.
Mm.
And if the developer has bought the software that generates things for them, then they take the results and go to an architect. And then the architect says, this won't work. I need to change this and this and this and that. So I think to be able to get real stickiness in a construction product, you need to win the architect or whomever designing the building.
And how do you do that with a new tool today? I mean, how do you win an architect as a customer when there's so many options, when there's so much embedded knowledge and expense, and there's this whole idea of, I've already all these sunk costs in existing software. How do you
Yeah,
win them with software that you can talk all day long about the
yeah,
features and benefits and how it's going to
yeah.
benefit, but you have to break the current cycle.
Or you have or slot into the current cycle, and that's what we decided to do. In the beginning of Finch, we had this idea of solving everything. We should do terrain, and we did.
I remember
No,
you had like
yeah,
hydrology animations, the water drainage in some of your
yeah,
your grasshopper scripts that you were
yeah.
showing. Yeah.
Because I mean, uh, yeah, that particular script was something we used in the architecture studio and got paid extra for, and the things that we actually got paid in Finch, one of the early clients paid us to generate terrain and topography and so on.
Hmm.
And we could solve it, so we did that. But turns out that was in general not a problem for the the architect.
Yeah.
Usually there was an engineer that dealt with that and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So as we got wiser, or we believe we got wiser at least, we started to get more and more narrow. And now we generate floor plans and only work at the inside of the building. And of course that does not make sense if you don't have the outside, if you don't have the whole chain. So we solved that by building extensions to popular software out there. So one workflow could be that you start in Rhino, you do your massing, and through that our extension, you send the massing into Finch, you generate the inside, do the planning, and from our other extension, you send it to Revit. And then all of a sudden you have the whole chain, and the architect is able to go from ID to documentation. And just a couple of months ago, we launched a Forma extension that was very appreciated by all of the Autodesk users that was not using McNeil, for example. Then they could start in Forma, doing their massing, go into Finch, and go into Revit for the documentation. So we're trying to fit into their existing workflow.
Yeah. And take away a lot of that manual work, right? Of like number one, figuring out the interior, but then number two, actually drawing it, modeling it, and building. Yeah, in 3D.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's doing that part for you when you're sending it into Revit.
Yeah, exactly. And one important aspect of this is that we said no one like exporting and importing, and then you have forgot one thing you want to change, and then you need to export the file and import. So our take on that was to build extensions or plugins. So just with a single click in any of the environment, you just send all your data back and forth. And when going to Revit, that is actually a one direction from Finch into Revit. But then we also build, a complete Revit model, native Revit families. That is, walls are walls and slabs are slabs and so on. And that was also one of these things that we did not think too much about in the beginning, that had a value, but turns out that people spending a lot of time, just setting up the Revit file, going from Rhino to Revit. So that is one of the highly appreciated features in Finch. I think the building of the Revit file.
Yeah,
that was a little bit of a surprise.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to tell you about something that I think is pretty great and you might be interested in it. And that is my exclusive newsletter available only to paid members of TRXL Plus that I call Leadership Edge. If you're looking to stay ahead of the curve in architecture and technology, Leadership Edge delivers insights that you won't find anywhere else. Why? Well, because they are my deep dives into the podcast conversations, just like the one that you're listening to in this episode, to give you an edge on the industry. Each edition of the newsletter provides key insights for forward-thinking leaders seeking innovation in AEC who are short on time, offering the context of each conversation without the need to listen to the full episode. I've actually designed them, though, to keep you updated, spark your interest, and encourage you to tune into the full episodes if those ideas resonate. And the best part is that they are packed with actionable takeaways to help you navigate the future of practice. By becoming a paid supporter, you get Leadership Edge delivered right to your inbox, and it's a direct way to support my podcast while getting exclusive, valuable content to sharpen your leadership mindset. You can join today at trxl.co and start receiving my Leadership Edge newsletters. Just click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit the link that I put in the show notes. Thanks. Now back to the conversation. So you're talking about slotting into kind of existing workflows and taking over maybe what the tool isn't the best at, right? Like so.
Yeah.
So Rhino, great for massing, great for, obviously a lot of people use Rhino for lots and lots of things and to different levels of success. But you're basically saying as an architect, right? And kind of injecting BIM into a workflow that, using the best tool for the job. I keep seeing this over and over. Like no one's trying to replace Revit as a documentation tool. right?
No.
It's like the king of, Graphisoft and Revit have figured this out, right? And
Yeah.
Autodesk, I should say. And that's a really difficult, I'm sure, problem to address as a smaller in,
Yeah.
and Autodesk and Graphisoft are both enormous, right? So trying to, with little resources, out develop a documentation tool that is so embedded would be really, really difficult. So keeping that there,
Yeah.
keeping the massing part in Rhino, and like slotting in right in between those two things makes a ton of sense. And I mean, you said early on you wanted to do it all. You wanted to solve it all. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of architects who are, maybe thinking about going into software development also want to do it all. And I keep hearing over and over again, it's like, oh, we really had to focus down onto this one thing to do it well. And so from a architect turned software development, like that transition, like I'm sure many realities came to light during that transition, because I think a lot of architects think like, well, we work on complex projects all the time and they become a reality and they take years, and okay, software can't be that different. And I'm just curious, like, how difficult was that transition for you mentally, to go from like, oh no, like we can't solve it all? I'm just curious, like, when did that come up for you? It's like, oh, we wanted to do all this stuff. We really shouldn't do all this stuff. We should
Yeah.
be part of the ecosystem rather than trying to replace some major product.
Yeah. I mean, I think we started out trying to do it all. Um, and then when you realize, when you start to think about it, okay, you can take one of the parts, let's say terrain, just as an example, and you start to think about all the things you would like to do with the terrain to make it like fantastic user experience, solve all the problems and so on. And then you started to think about it. Then, okay, we need a couple of developers that do this. We need to solve this. And you do that for all of the areas. And all of a sudden you realize that we will probably, need millions of dollars and a team of 100 people, and then it would take us 5 years anyhow. And that, I mean, that is one route to go, trying to convince a venture capital that you're going to do that. And we see people trying to do it, but we choose the other route and say, okay, let's choose one area where we see clients have a lot of pain, spending a lot of time, and are willing to pay for a better solution.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, that became the space planning and the inside. And that was really painful to say, the terrain tool that we developed, let's just throw it out, delete the code. I was not popular in the office that day, but turns out that each time you close a door, you're also able to focus much more on the relevant things. And that is, I think that's key when designing or building software. There's just so much you would like to do, but there's not time or resources or to do it all.
Could versus should do. Yeah, you could do anything, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your competition. You have a lot of different competitors in this play. I mean, it's like, I feel like we're drowning in early design stage software now, right?
Yeah.
We've got there's so many. There's TestFit, there's Hypar, there's Schema, there's Arcol, there's Snaptrude, and there's a lot of this kind of early stage conceptual design, Jello Cube, program kind of tools out there. I mean, and the way that I see it is like, when you're building architectural software, this is where projects start. So you have to have a solution that starts there. And if you get enough users who care enough about the product, you will develop something more from there, but you have to have that piece in place. And I'm curious, from your point of view, like, Like what makes like why are you doing Finch? Why when there are many other options out there right now? Like why does this matter to you? What are you doing maybe differently? What are you doing that matters in this space?
Yeah. So regarding the competition, I mean, I was part of a Pechakucha in London last week. I think it was 7 other startups that also were
Oh, that's
pitching.
right. I heard about
A
that.
lot of
Mm-hmm.
the firms you mentioned there was doing their great presentation there as well. And I think first of all, some wise persons said once that very few startups dies because of competition. It's always suicide. That is why startup fails. You know, you're not able to sell your product to enough customers. You're not able to build a good team and so on. So I spend actually very little time uh, caring about our competition.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some people might call me arrogant, but that's not my intention. I'm just, I mean, I never worry about our competition. I but I see them, and in general, I would say it's great for us because the more new tools out there, the more kind of prepared the clients are. And usually one of the good qualifiers when we're meeting a client is that we ask them, have you used any other generative tools? Have you used another? And if they say, yeah, okay, we're using TestFit or another software, then I think that's a good sign. Okay, here's a client that are progressive, you know, interested in new tools. If they're saying, we only use Revit and sometimes, you know, paper and pen. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You can still create great architecture, but it will probably be harder for us to, you know,
Yeah.
come into their
Mm-hmm.
workflow. Um, so, and speaking of early stage, I think Finch, we also position ourselves a little bit later in the chain. It is a higher level of detail in Finch. We dealing with access, compliance, the inside, and so on. While a lot of the other software maybe focus more on the massing and the big parts of the
Sure.
project. We come in a little bit later, maybe.
What do you think about kind of the diverse software licensing that would be required of an architect nowadays, right? It's like, okay, well, I need a tool for this, and then I need another tool for this. I mean, there's something to be said for the specificity of the tool, right? Like, you
Yeah.
know, it like you're using it for what it's best for, and because there are options, I actually get to pick the best one for the job. At least
Mm.
that's my positive spin on this, right? It's like, oh, there may be a lot of tools that I need, but I'm prepared. It's like when I go into the workshop, I get to use the right tool for the right thing.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, it's a little bit overwhelming. And I think this also goes into my last question about the competition. It's like when you're talking about now your clients, the architects out there, and
Yeah.
they have to choose, or they need to buy several different things, and kind of, you know, with the way licensing works nowadays. I had a great conversation on the podcast with Shane Berger, who is at SOM, right? It was like, well, I only use this tool this much of the year because, you know, and it's only for these people, and maybe we got to swap those people out, and this gets to be a very difficult problem for IT. You can't maintain all the software all the time for everybody. I mean, continue to pay for it by maintain, right? So I'm just curious from your point of view, how are you addressing that? What empathy do you feel for the users out there? You were one. I
Yeah.
mean, not everybody has just one perpetual license of Rhino.
No.
You know, God bless them for still doing that, right? But at the same time, it's like there's all these subscriptions, there's all these tools. They all do really bespoke things. They're working together in a really great sense, right? You know, as far as APIs
Yeah.
and things go, and sending data back and forth and playing nicely in this ecosystem. But man, like it's a lot to juggle for an architect.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, and I think the whole industry is also, you know, trying to find our way. How will this work? And a lot of companies, experiment with charging per project. Someone has floating seats, someone has named licenses, someone charge per based on turnover at the company and so on. And I think we will see in the coming years if maybe that everyone finds their way in there. From our perspective right now, we're still earlier on in this journey. We are kind of startup or maybe a scale up. We're not a corporate, that trying to tweak the last percentage out. From our perspective, we and what we're charging right now is let me so I don't say the wrong thing. I'm not in sales here, but 12,000 euros for a year, and then X amount of seats. I think it's 3 seats in general for that offer. And why we do that is that it's a high enough amount for us to get the architect's attention, so to speak. So when a client signs with us, they have had to take a decision like, are we willing to take this investment? Are we willing to do the training, the onboarding, and so on?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also low enough to be reasonable for most larger or mid-sized firms. And what's really, really important for us in the phase we are with the company right now is to get a close relationship with the client, so we can have a direct line to get. They take the decision to buy Finch and implement in the organization, and they also have us on speed dial. So if things not working or things will change, we get constant feedback and we can iterate fast together with the clients. And I think that's key. And if we were to give it away for free, I would say that the clients would not be as invested in, and you would not get the harsh truth always, because when people need to pay for things, they really will tell you when they don't like it, and then we get a chance to fix it.
And so it sounds to me though like you're, and maybe not though, but you focused what the product is, what it does, but you're also focused on who your user is and kind of creating a selection criteria for it. So 3 seats for rough $12,000 a year. You're pricing out small firms by doing that, who don't need 3 seats. They don't need it all the time. But for medium and large size firms, that is, I'm sure that probably is really attractive.
So we sell globally. We have customers in US, Australia, Asia, Scandinavia, all over the place. But it is mid-size or large firms. They work in early stage with multifamily residential. So and they are usually progressive offices that are interested in new tools. And we started there, and of course, as time we have offerings, Finch Basic as well for single users that is cheaper and so on. But but on being very focused on who's your client is, it's also easier for us to build a relevant product for that specific client.
Yeah, the argument of horizontal versus vertical software. Horizontal doing it all and not doing any of it really well, versus vertical and being like the best of the best when it comes to solving those problems is, that's a wonderful thing to know that there are software companies out there doing that, because there's so many times where it's like, well, the software does everything, but it doesn't do this thing really well, and it doesn't address, it's hard. I can see the argument there.
Yeah. So, if you are a architecture firm working with multifamily residential, we are the best. If you are very into, dealing with terrain, we're probably the worst, because we don't even have a terrain tool.
You threw that code away. You deleted it.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you just talk about kind of how Finch has evolved over like the last 5 years from like you tell me like what the
Yep.
original script was before that, but just say in the last 5 years, like where's Finch, how has it evolved?
Uh, I, I think two things. More and more is what we say real AI these days. In the beginning was a lot of algorithms, parametric design and so on, but more and more parts are being replaced with AI or machine learning. As I mean, 5 years ago when we started, that was before Midjourney and ChatGPT and so on,
Yep.
and people was not that familiar with that. And the second part is that our editing capabilities is also evolving rapidly. So I think that's the main thing that has changed or been developed
Can you talk
during the
about
last
what
years.
does real AI mean? Because yeah, you're right. A lot of companies have just transitioned their marketing away
Yeah,
from machine learning or away from algorithms to AI as kind of a catch-all. But what do you mean by when
yeah,
you say real AI?
yeah. But real AI is for example, we use graph technology where we map all of the spaces in the building as a node, and then we connect these nodes with edges, and that becomes like a network graph. And that is not something that we have invented. That is like a network graph is a uh, common concept. And then we train that with neural networks, graph neural networks, to predict number of things. For example, if you have these nodes, what do we think this node is, as an example?
Hmm.
And then we have, just as all other kinds of AI, we have a lot of data that we feed into the system. Then it, make a prediction and a result comes out. And then it can, for example, if we try to break it down, when it tries to classify these nodes in the building, spaces in the building, is probably not very likely. I usually say that you go from the elevator into the toilet and then into your neighbor's apartment. That's
Perfect.
just
Perfect
yeah,
transition.
yeah.
Yeah.
that that's probably hopefully no architecture in the training data that has this kind of flow.
Hmm.
While it's probably very likely that you go from kind of a corridor into a hallway and then maybe into a toilet.
Then into the bathroom.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Uh, so and these kind of things are what I would say real AI, neural network, machine learning, and
Training.
so on.
Okay.
But when it comes to making sure that a uh, corridor is 1200 millimeter wide exactly, then algorithms are just better.
So it's a
You know,
mix.
put
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a mix of different technologies.
Where's that data coming from, like that you're doing this training with? Because I mean, it sounds like you have to
Yeah,
train it on what is it a mix of kind of spreadsheet data and graphic plan, or how are you doing this?
yeah. So we are actually collecting data mostly manually from built project all around the world,
Oh,
adding it
interesting.
to our system, and then our system maps it with this graph technology and so on. And we said that we uh, by adding built project, there is a certain quality to it.
Yeah.
We believe.
It's past some level of test, right, to get to that
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of other generative tools and papers is just putting rectangles besides each other,
Yeah.
and that is not architecture. I would argue. While real projects are sometimes also bad, but you can also see. I mean, it's very different on different locations. I mean, US you have built in a certain way, in the Europe in another way, and so on, and that is kind of reflected in the data set. So we also tag all collect the data where it come from.
I was
So
going to ask you about that because like there's different rules with codes, right? With types of
yeah,
stairwells and exiting and all of these kinds of things that you can get away
yeah,
with in certain locations and you can't in others. It's just a different set of requirements. So you do specifically tag that information so that the architect can't use it if they're in a different location, or just so that they're aware of that the output is potentially unusable. Like, how do you distinguish in the
yeah.
in the
So
flow of work?
yeah, we make them aware of it. So you can filter on US style or
Interesting.
European style and so on. I mean, because we saw, I mean, in the US, it's common or okay at least to enter an apartment through the kitchen, a small apartment at least, while that would be unthinkable in Scandinavia, for example. And in the beginning, we actually had clients say, "Oh, this is a bug," but we just said, no, it's just from another
Mm.
location.
Mm.
And in Asia, there's a wet kitchen and dry kitchen. I just like, what is this? So I've also learned a lot about how you design dwellings on different places
As a
across our
software
globe.
developer, that's got to be really interesting because, like, as an architect
Yeah,
turned software developer,
yeah,
right? Because you're used to
yeah,
practicing, like, it's interesting how regional architecture is, and then now you're making a tool that just
yeah,
kind of applies across the board in a certain market segment, but across the
yeah,
board globally, right? And
yeah,
wow, different set of rules for different regions, and all of a sudden you kind of obviously now you're aware of that, and to
yeah,
now build that into the tool, yeah, a tricky
yeah.
tricky
That's
challenge.
been really exciting, and I think while there are differences of how you know create architecture or how you puzzle these spaces together, there are also some that is very, I mean, everyone needs somewhere to sleep, everyone needs somewhere to eat, and so on. It's kind of the same components, just puzzled together a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Can you maybe I guess we could start to wrap up here. We're
yeah,
getting toward the end, I believe, but it feels like now now at the end, Jesper,
yeah.
if you could talk about kind of what it's like to work in Finch. What do you need to bring to Finch? Where does it slot in exactly? Just so people have a better understanding of where this fits into the toolbox, and kind of the order of tools that we would use in our tool stack to produce architecture.
Yep. So we generate floor plans. So for multifamily residential. So if you work with multifamily residential, we help you with the inside. And to work with Finch, you need a tool kind of in front of Finch where you create the mass. And this tool can be Rhino, it can be Grasshopper, it can be Revit or Forma at the moment. So these four tools, you need to have one of them, which most firms actually have, turns out. Then you feed that mass into Finch where we generate the inside and you can edit it and so on, of course. And then at the other side, it goes out to Revit. It can go out to Rhino and so on, but I would say almost all of our clients end up in Revit for documentation. So that's where we go. So we sit in between the massing tools and the documentation tools.
Yeah.
That's where we sit.
And it's a browser-based tool. Is that correct?
It's a browser-based tool, yes. So it's runs in the cloud, in the browser, so you don't have to install Finch. You just have to create the account. That makes the IT department very happy.
And so how are you sending the data into Finch? I mean, you say you need these certain tools. So to me, it means that you're sending stuff through a Grasshopper
Yeah,
script or through, I don't know, you tell me.
yeah. So you install a Finch plugin to Rhino and one into Revit.
Gotcha.
Very simple plugin where you sign in with your email and then there's a button basically send the info to Finch. So that is very simple workflow, and usually that is also, I mean, if you already have Rhino installed, for example, then you just go to the package manager, type Finch, and then it's installed. And for Revit, you just go to the Autodesk App Store and click install. So it's very, very simple
Nice.
procedure.
Cool. Sounds great. I would love to send people your way who are interested, who fit your criteria of the
Yeah,
problem that you're solving. So if that's you, listener, head over to you tell them where they need to go.
finch3d.com.
Finch 3D.
There you, or feel free to send me an email at jesper@finch3d.com, or you find me on any, or Instagram or LinkedIn and so on.
So I'll have all the links to everything that Jesper
Yep.
just mentioned in the show notes for this episode. Jesper, there's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. It's been a long time coming, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, been following your work, and I think you always had like this air of there was like this mysterious layer to what you were doing early on. It was like
Yeah.
the comments, like you said, like this Instagram post blew up, and there was just all these comments and it was like, crickets, what's going on over there? Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think like that actually made it a little more intriguing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you were intentionally marketing it like that or not, but it was always something like, I wonder what they're up to over there. And then every once in a
Yeah.
while you drop a little animated GIF out there for people to look at, and it's like, oh, that look, I want that. I mean, it kind of created this desire of, and so
Yeah.
kind of an industry. It's so interesting with social media today, and software products, and kind of just showing what you're working on can be so intriguing for other people. Like, oh, I want that too. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah. We just, there was no strategy. We just shared things that we created, and thought this looks cool.
Yeah.
This is worth sharing, and then we did that. And
Look where it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
incredible. What an incredible story.
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about it today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.